Hello everybody, welcome back to L-Space Books. My name is Tristan. Welcome to the channel if you're new, welcome back if you're returning. As per usual, I have sat down to start filming this video and the cats have just started playing. So if you hear a lot of scratching, scrambling, banging, crashing, breaking things in the background, it's them. Okay, cool. So I tried to film this video already and I got a mic for Christmas from my partner, and the cord for the mic is just a little bit too short to really be practical for like putting it on myself. Like basically you would be able to see the cord dangling in the shot if that were to be the case. So we got an extension cord. Turns out the extension cord just makes the sound quality terrible. And so we decided that that's just not going to be what we're going to do. And by we, I mean I. Yeah, it's unfortunate that the thing didn't work, but you know, Amazon basics, what are you going to do? So I'm refilming. Here we are. These are going to be my thoughts on the first, I guess this is my first sort of wrap up about my thoughts on Victor Hugo's Les Mis, or Les Misérables, which is phenomenal. Let's just start there and say that I am thoroughly loving this book. It has been a very interesting experience because for so long, and by so long I mean since 2009, or, well, I guess it's not 2009, it's when the movie came out, which I think is like 2011, 2010 maybe, but anyway, I'll put the correct date somewhere around in here. But ever since that happened, ever since the musical came out with Hugh Jackman, it's been my goal, or dream, if you will. I dreamed a dream that I would one day read Les Mis in French, and now we're a decade and almost a half later, and I'm finally doing it. I finally feel confident enough in my French, as well as my knowledge of French culture, French history, of, I guess specifically the 19th century, to where I can actually like read, enjoy, and understand this at a pretty deep level. You know, I just waited until I got my master's degree in French until I was ready to read this book, but that's neither here nor there. I'm gonna have to pause because the cat is chewing on some tape. Wally! Okay, so one of the main things that is kind of surprising me about this book is that it's quite slow going. Which, to an extent, I was expecting. I was anticipating taking basically the entire month of January to read Les Mis from start to finish. However, it has now taken most of January thus far, and I have not finished book 1 of 3. Keep in mind this is the first 485 pages of the novel, and I still have 2 more books in it that are of similar length to this one. So it's definitely taking a lot longer than I was expecting. You know, I'm reading in a second language, so it is just a little bit slower for me. Where I can normally read between like 30 to 40 pages an hour, this is more like 20. So, you know, that's something like 40 pages a day if I'm taking 2 hours to read every day, because I take an hour to read in the morning and then maybe sometimes an hour to read it in the evening. So yeah, it's just a little slow. But despite that, I'm very much enjoying the experience because this is a really good book. I am loving the insane attention to detail. I guess I shouldn't say insane attention to detail. It's more like the meticulous attention to detail that Hugo gives to his descriptions and his characters. The one example that I'm kind of always returning to is, so I guess to give a little bit of context there, you get a lot of background information about pretty much every single character, even the very minor side ones that appear for maybe 10 pages as a whole. one being Sister Simplice, who I will talk about in a minute. So I can understand where that might put people off because they are not throwaway characters, but they are very side and almost irrelevant characters, though they do end up performing a very important function once they do appear and once their sort of, I guess, place in the narrative is resolved. I guess in a contemporary lens, if we were reading this, if this was being edited today, those sorts of details, like the childhood of Sister Simplice, would be omitted because it would be seen as unnecessary to the overall narrative. Additionally, Hugo goes on to kind of this is technically a historical novel, even when it was published. So this was published in 1860s, somewhere around there, and this is dealing with events that happened from 1815 all the way up to 1848 and maybe a little bit past that. So it's technically a historical novel, and for that reason Hugo also gives a lot of historical context to what's going on. So in the beginning of the Cosette section, Hugo goes on this 50 or 60 page explanation of the Battle of Waterloo, and he provides kind of his philosophical, ethical, political, spiritual analysis of the Battle of Waterloo, which was the one that Napoleon was finally defeated by the British. Again, in contemporary sensibilities, that would just be cut because it actually did not add anything to the novel. It did not heighten it. It's just it was a very long-winded way of just showing that there was a transfer of power basically in France, that there was a government shift. It was the restoration of the monarchy is what happens after Napoleon is defeated. So it's just a long-winded way of saying that happened. So yeah, in modern sensibilities, that would be basically what we would say. It's just that would be maybe a paragraph at most. But this is 50 pages of it. 50-page, again, analysis of Waterloo, which to an extent is very much unnecessary. However, it's also quite interesting. I'm not a military history kind of guy. I'm not really that interested in it, at all. But nonetheless, I think that it's fascinating to see Hugo's take on it because he is a pretty interesting thinker and a pretty interesting person just in general. And so when he kind of puts his 2 cents into talking about Waterloo, it's interesting. So, circling back to what I was talking about the, a lot of the meticulous detail about every single character. So, circling back to what I was talking about with the meticulous detail about, the characters' backgrounds and stuff, I can see why a lot of people might think that it is unnecessary, and I guess from a craft standpoint it is. But the thing that I really enjoy about it is that it allows the things that those side characters do in the narrative to really, you feel them so much more intensely. So I won't spoil exactly what happens, but basically there's something that happens with Sister Simplice that is so shocking given all of the information that you've read about her childhood and just her way of life and the way that she is as a person, to where when that little twist happens with her, I was shocked. She sort of does some things progressively to where you're wait a second, did she just do that? And then it happens again, you're okay, yeah, she definitely did that. And then she does it again, and then you're oh wow, this is pretty insane, the way that this is unfolding. And so I was very caught up in this moment where she is kind of betraying her own values in a way, and just kind of she's going against this core fundamental piece of herself, that it's just like, it's crazy. That moment when that happened in this book was just, it's so far one of the most memorable things of this book, because it was just so shocking and so satisfying. And I think that the satisfaction and the shock value would not have been as prevalent or maybe strong if I hadn't gotten that like extensive and again meticulous detail about her like background and childhood. So I personally very much enjoy all of the detail and the long-windedness of this, because there is also something to be said about having an author who is not afraid to take his time with the story that he's trying to tell. And we get that with Jane Eyre too. I think that there's a lot of long-windedness in that book too. They're both romantic novels because they both come out of the romantic period, but I think the fact that they're taking their time is also indicative of the cultural situation that they were in versus what we're in, because this level of, again, I will say the word details, take a shot every time I say detail. The level of detail that's in this book is not something that we get anymore. And nor do we get it, in things like Jane Eyre, we wouldn't get as much detail as that book either, or any of the Brontes for that matter. I mean, it is just because we have so many more books that are being published right now, and so there is a lot more competition for people's time and attention. Whereas when this book was published, it was kind of expected that people were going to read this and like read it from cover to cover, and he was not really competing with anybody for their time and their attention. And so he could afford to take his time, and he could afford to give this extra space to these other things that he found important to include in this. And, you just don't get that nowadays, which, I don't really know how to feel about that, because on the one hand, I do really like a really tight, complete story, like what we see with, or like what I see with Philippe Besson and all of his work. Just like the amount of detail and everything that he can compact into 150 pages is incredible. And you still feel like you still feel like his characters and things like that without taking the entire like first 100 pages or so of the book to talk about the priest. That being said, the way that Hugo was writing the book, it makes a lot of sense why he would frame it the way he did. So the priest that is at the beginning of the book kind of sets up the philosophical groundwork that you're supposed to view the events of the rest of the book. And he is also, to an extent, this anathema of priestliness, basically, because he is this very giving, very generous, very gracious and charitable person, compassionate, and he's kind of juxtaposed to the rest of the clergy in the Catholic Church, who are really just kind of like cloying for power in an influence, who's going to be the next cardinal type of thing, or who's going to be the next archbishop. And then there's just this guy who's a rural priest, and he's just doing his thing, but also living according to Hugo's sensibilities. And honestly, like, I think a lot of modern sensibilities, just like a very godly, Christ-like life, according to that particular faith tradition. It's also a way for Hugo to put his own philosophy and his own ethics and I guess his own theology into the book. And like I said, it lays the philosophical groundwork for how you're supposed to read the rest of the novel. And it also basically, like, he is this particular character, the priest, Monsieur Bienvenu, is very important, obviously, for what happens with Jean Valjean throughout the book. And I think, for me, it was very worth spending the amount of time that you do with the priest to, like, really get to know him and really understand the amount of impact that his act of kindness and act of grace for and to Jean Valjean, like, to really understand the weight of all of that. I think that spending all that time with Monsieur Bienvenu really added to that and, like, really made me understand just how powerful of a gesture that was. So here am I giving all of this excessive detail about a pretty minor point, but I did want to give you some actual examples and some thoughts about things that actually happen in the book. The language. I was surprised because it's, going on 200 years old now, and whenever you read older works, you do kind of worry that the language is going to be not as accessible. It's going to be maybe dry, maybe it's going to be boring, when it comes to French, maybe it's just going to be really difficult to read because French is not my first language, and going in and reading a nearly 200-year-old French classic, But, I mean, I don't give myself enough credit because I have a master's degree in the language. Anyway, it's fine. But I'm not a native speaker. This is surprisingly easy to read, is what I'm getting at here. The language is also quite beautiful. Hugo has a way with words. He's a poet. I think we all have kind of come to realize that poets make the best writers, and Hugo certainly was an accomplished poet. And his writing in his novels, his prose, is very, 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 very good. I have underlined quite a few passages in this, both ones that are lines that have touched me, and then also interesting things from a literary movement perspective, all the way down to just, like, interesting moments or just, like, interesting character details that have stood out to me and whatever. But yeah, it's definitely been a rewarding experience, and it's been one that has been a very, not intense, but just, like, a good experience. I am so happy that I finally started reading this, and I'm having a great time, even though it is taking up all of my time. I have realized that I do kind of need to take a little bit of a break after I finish reading this one, even if that break ends up being Swann's Way by Marcel Proust. While I am thoroughly enjoying this, and while I am kind of eager to continue reading the novel, I think that I'm needing to do 1 volume a month now. So after I'm done with this, I'm going to put down the novel for the remainder of January, and then I'm going to pick up book 2 in February, and then that's where I will start. Just because I don't want this to become a chore. I don't want to feel like I'm putting off other reading projects at the expense of this, and I don't want to feel like I'm missing out on things that I also want to be reading. So, like, I do really want to be reading Swann's Way, so I am also going to prioritize that once I'm done with this. So anyway, it's just a little bit of reading plans update, I guess. It's a weekly wrap up, weekly reading update, all of those sorts of things. But yeah, once I'm done with this, and I don't have very much left. I have about 40 pages left, so that's like another day's worth of reading. Once I'm finished with this, which hopefully will be like either today or tomorrow, I am going to be putting it down for Swann's Way, as well as a couple other books that I'm very eager to either finish or get to. But yeah, I'm having a great time, guys. This has been a great experience. If you have not read Les Mis, I really think you should. It's such an interesting book. It's, I think, pretty important as far as just like an overall, I don't know, it's not necessarily, I mean, just like it's an important work in general. the things that Hugo has to say about the way we should be treating our underprivileged people, the way that we should be treating each other just in general. I think that it's still very relevant today. And I think one of the big like things that's in this book is just like good people disobey bad laws, which is a little saying that is very important to me, especially now after a certain transition that happened in our neck of the woods. But yeah, I don't know. I wish that it was not as intimidating to people as it is, and I wish that more people felt comfortable actually diving in and reading it, because it really is worth the time and the effort to get into it, because I think it's just a beautiful book and it's a fascinating subject, and just, yeah, it's great. Love it. It is honestly going to be a 5-star read for me, and it will also probably end up being like one of my top favorite books of all time because of how much this is impacting me. And I'm glad that I'm doing this over YouTube, because it is kind of like witnessing a personal transformation, because this is, the accomplishment of a long time goal, and then also this book is also just kind of reshaping some things for me. But yeah, anyway, it's a great experience. I love it. I'm having a great time. And I think that is where I'm going to leave it, because otherwise I'm just going to be repeating myself a whole bunch. I would love to film a video kind of talking about the historical context as well as the literary movements of the time. If that's something that people are interested in, I definitely would love to do that, because, put my degree to use. Because I think there are some things in this that people might miss if you don't have as much familiarity with the time period, that I would be happy to kind of analyze and present my own thoughts on. So if that is something that people would like, let me know. I'll probably do it anyway, but still, I would love to know if you want to see it. But yes, that is something that I would like to do at some point, and yeah, stay tuned for when I start Volume 2 in February. I'm still going to do my final thoughts on this, even though this is kind of, it's funny because I say that this is my first wrap up and like thoughts video of it, and here I am almost done with it, but I will give my final thoughts soon, once I finish this section, because this goes through Fantine, and Cosette, and it will carry us into what happens next in Volume 2. And with that, this is going to carry us in to what happens next in the next video. So until then, we'll see you very soon. Take care. Thank you for watching. Bye.